Tonight it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. Writer and lecturer and space artist Michael Carroll has 34 books in print. He is a science journalist, novelist, and children's author. His latest novel is a quantum mystery called Plato's Labyrinth, Dinosaurs. There's copies of it on the table. Ancient Greeks and Time Travel. His latest nonfiction book is Beyond Artemis, Human Missions to the Moons of the Solar System. Carroll is a fellow and founding member of the International Association for the Astronomical Arts and recipient of the Lucien Rudaux Award for Lifetime Achievement in the Astronomical Arts. He was a fellow in the 2016 to 2017 Antarctic Artists and Writers Program of the U.S. National Science Foundation. One of his paintings is on the surface of Mars in digital form aboard the Phoenix lander. He likes orange marshmallow circus peanuts, which have been outlawed, which have been outlawed by the nutritional councils of several countries. Please welcome Michael Carroll. Thank you.
Well, hello. Hello again. It is so great to be here. I love this group. It's full of creative, interesting people, and it's great to be a guest. So tonight, we're talking about not just Artemis, but what's going to happen after it, what may happen after it. Artemis, of course, is the international program to get people back to the moon. Back in 1610, some interesting things happened in astronomy. I'll bet all of you know one of them. Anybody know what happened in 1610? Had to do with Galileo. Well, he used a telescope. The Jovian moons, he discovered the Galilean satellites, yes. And the same year, Johannes Kepler sent him a letter. And Kepler said this: "Let us create vessels and sails adjusted to the heavenly ether, and there will be plenty of people unafraid of the empty waste." Let me show you 4 of those people. These people are going to go beyond the moon. Probably next month, if all goes well. All didn't go well this month, but next month we'll see. Artemis 2 is on deck to send people farther than they have ever gone. Now, actually, that's the standard NASA statement. The fact is that depending on the launch window, they may actually not go that far. They will go beyond the moon, around the moon, but only several of the launch opportunities will bring them further than any human has gone. But that's what they're shooting for, and it's an exciting time that we live in to be talking about these things. Of course, it all harkens back to the early 1960s, to a very different world. John F. Kennedy gave an inspiring speech first at Rice University, and when it went okay there, he gave it to Congress. And in that speech, he said, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Things like this drive our technology, drive our economy, benefit the entire world." Kennedy knew that. He also knew that it was an important diplomatic tool to use, and I would submit that Artemis is as well. I believe it was Glenn Lunny was walking along the coast at Corpus Christi shortly after the end of the Apollo program. He was a key player, and a friend of his with him, they were looking up at the moon. His friend said, "I wonder when we'll be back." And he said, "Whoever tries to go will find out how hard it was." So don't forget how hard Artemis is with this thing that we are doing. We have people right here working on it. Very exciting. So like any good superhero, the moon has a great backstory. And it involves something that is nicknamed Theia, a Mars-sized object that came barreling in from the outer solar system and bashed into the Earth, a glancing blow, peeled off a bunch of crustal material, which became a ring that within 20,000 years probably became our moon. There are all kinds of reasons to believe this, to come to this conclusion. They have to do with computer modeling, but they also have to do with isotopes. And we didn't know all of this for sure until we had confirmation when we got our hands on pieces of the moon. The isotopes there, the chemistry show us that the moon, in fact, is made of stuff that is very typical of a planetary crust, but not typical of a well-mixed moon as it should be. So that helps us with the origin story of this place that we're about to go to. Now, to fill in the blanks on that story, there is one place, one region on the moon that is a better target than any other place. This is an open book for the earliest history of the lunar story, and it is the South Pole Aitken Basin, which is actually the largest identified impact basin in the entire solar system. It's this big, low place, and down toward the bottom of it in this image is where the South Pole is. That, in fact, is the Artemis zone of exploration, the place where we will be hoping to set down roots and do some heavy scientific exploring. The South Pole has some other things to offer besides lunar history, and one thing is water. The blue places that you see are regions that never see sunlight. They haven't for millions of years. This means that water, even though it's in a hard vacuum, water can actually be preserved in these places. And so, if you want to set down permanent roots on a place like the moon, you need resources around you. Water is a great resource. You can split it up, use the hydrogen for rocket fuel, use the oxygen for breathing. How many people here are breathing right now? Okay, it's very, first of all, health thing here, please do keep doing that. But water will save us a lot of time and energy if we can mine it on the surface of the moon. So we want to go there close by and explore and look for these places that may have water inventories. We're not sure yet what that water looks like. Is it buried under a thin layer of moon dirt, regolith, that you can just scoop out with a snow shovel? Likely not. Sadly, it's probably a web of stuff mixed in with the gravel and sand. So it may be hard to mine, but it's going to be worth it in the long run. That painting, by the way, is on the cover of my book. I've done 12 different paintings in the new book coming up about Artemis. So, speaking of Galileo and his telescope, he was one of the first, possibly the first, to publish images of the moon that he had drawn. And Galileo and those that followed noticed some interesting things going on at the top and the bottom of the moon. It looked like there were things sticking out of the shadows, mountains looming out of the darkness on the north and south poles. And in fact, it looked like maybe they never got dark. Maybe these were mountains that were constantly illuminated. Camille Flammarion called them peaks of eternal light. It's very poetic. Is it true? Well, back in those days, they thought of lunar mountains as something that probably looked like the Alps. After all, the newest, youngest mountains on Earth are rugged, pointy things, haven't been worn down by wind and water, and there's no wind and water on the moon, so they must be kind of alpine things. Well, it turns out they are eroded constantly by micrometeorites, but nobody knew that at the time. And so this is probably what they had in mind. They also, many observers reported seeing a spectrum across these mountains as if there was frost. That was probably chromatic aberration problems with the lens itself, but nevertheless, it contributed to this mindset that, oh, there's these mountains down there. It turns out that there are high points at the poles, and especially the South Pole, that get a lot of sunlight. In fact, at the Artemis landing site, there's a spot on Shackleton crater rim that's illuminated 97% of the time. Okay, the primary landing site is here at the front. And so they're not peaks of eternal light, they're more like humps of eternal light, but easier to land on that way, I guess. So this is why we're interested in that, right? It's a great power source. It's a great place to set up electric power, solar power, not so good for wind power. We're working on bringing atmosphere there, I guess, but for now we'll settle for solar. This is a Lockheed Martin concept on the left, a solar power tower, and these would beam microwave energy down into the lower places where our hubs of civilization and manufacturing are, down into the suburbs. The moon is good for all kinds of science. One other thing, of course, is radio science. All you have to do is drive about 20 miles past the primary Artemis landing site, and you can't see the Earth anymore. And that's really good for radio science. We pump out garbage constantly in the radio spectrum, and if you want to listen to the heavens, you somehow got to get rid of that. All you got to do is go around the far side of the moon. And so this will be a very valuable investment for science there. And of course, there is magnificent natural beauty. This is a new frontier. This is a new wilderness that we are embarking on exploration. This is Schrodinger Valley, painting I did for the Lunar and Planetary Institute. It's a valley just north of where we're going to be setting up camp on the moon. It's 2.5 times as deep as the Grand Canyon, but you don't get that sense at all because there's no air. You don't get any sense of depth. Also, look how gentle the slopes are. The Grand Canyon is spectacular, and it's pretty wimpy compared to this, but this is very gentle. So it's kind of deceptive. This is something astronauts will have to deal with when they get there. There are going to be lots and lots of fun surprises as we get to the moon. If you can't read that, it says, "Pretty cool, Dewey. Hey, shake the jar and see if they'll fight." There are several other interesting things related to Artemis going on. One of them has to do with, oddly enough, the Library of Alexandria back in the time of the Ptolemies, back in Egypt. It was the repository of all human knowledge. That's what it was designed to be, and that's what they attempted. It had scrolls and documents from all over the ancient world. And of course, it burned during Julius Caesar's reign. It was not completely destroyed, but it was on its way down. But there's an outfit in Texas called Lone Star. I don't know how they got the name. And Chris Stott is the head of it. Chris is married to Nicole Stott, who actually wrote the introduction to my book. She was on space station for a year. Very creative engineer, watercolorist, and her husband is creative in a different kind of engineering in data handling. What they want to do is create a Library of Alexandria 2.0 on the moon, probably in one of the vast lava tubes under the Marius Hills on Mars. There's a lava tube there that you could fit 3 Manhattans in, okay? These are vast, vast underground places where the temperature is fairly stable, unlike the surface of the moon. So this would be a great place to keep a separate body of knowledge from humanity, okay? Interesting thought. They have already done some work on this. They've actually done some testing aboard the International Space Station, and they had a payload on the second flight, the Athena, from the Intuitive Missions Company. Sadly, the thing landed like this. It fell over in a crater and lasted for just a few hours. But their experiment worked beautifully while the batteries held out. It's hard to go back to the moon. It's hard to land on the moon. It's very, very tricky. There are all kinds of things that can go wrong on the way down and at landing. And these landers are lined up on deck to go to the moon in the next couple of years. Blue Moon Mark 1, Jeff Bezos' company, is the precursor to one of the versions of the lunar landers that will take people down. We have Firefly, which already landed safely. There's another one coming. Intuitive Missions hopes to do a successful landing on their third try. And the Griffin one is a very large, capable lander. So all of these things are feeding into the Artemis knowledge base. We need to know some of the things that these are going to be researching for us. All of this has echoes in how we did it the first time around. We went to the moon for somewhat different reasons back in the Cold War. Today, and that of course was essentially 2 nations. It was the Soviet Union and the United States. Today, Artemis has a whole bunch of partners, lots and lots and lots of them from all over the world. In fact, how many nations do you think are involved in Artemis? Let me see hands for someone who wants to guess. Just a guess. It won't hurt. Yes, back in the back. Pardon me? 67. 67. Any other guesses? 33. Okay, 67, 33. Give me another one. Yeah.
20.
Okay. You ready? As of January, there were 60 countries involved in Artemis. Lots and lots. And this is not just paying lip service or NASA saying, there, you can do this little bolt over here. These people are doing very, very energetic, critical pieces of Artemis. And so 67 was the closest. I'll give you $5 off if you buy a book, if you want one. You don't have to, of course. And if you are wondering if anybody else in all those nations cares, I was in Bulgaria a few months ago and found this STEM project for kids all about Artemis. You can build little SLS boosters and moon houses, and it's very cool. I wish I could read the instructions. So, can you? That you can on Mars. Actually, Mars and the moon both have the same problems. The regolith, the dirt, is horrible. So we're going to have to process things before we grow our potatoes. But that's okay. It's a goal. It's a space program goal, I'm sure. How did we do it last time? Well, we had to create lots of different types of spacecraft in different roles to teach us how to operate in space, how to get there. The first spacecraft for the US side was the Mercury. It was Vostok in the Soviet Union. Just carried one person, barely. They had to be crammed in through this tiny little door. And the spacecraft itself didn't have much capability, although the Mercuries did have some maneuverability. Vostok did not. It was a ball that was basically inert in space. It could be controlled slightly from its trans stage, but it dropped that off partway through. So Mercury had a little bit of an advantage, but it couldn't do a lot. What we needed to wait for was Gemini, where we had two people, and Gemini was really the groundbreaking. The tide turned in this program, because here it was that we learned how to work in space, dock, do all kinds of things. The first spacewalk happened actually just a few months before the American one. Alexei Leonov left the confines of the Voskhod, which was the two-person spacecraft. Remember, this story is not about nuts and bolts, okay? I think that stuff's really interesting, but that's not the whole story. This is a very human story. Alexei Leonov learned English in Texas, so he had a Houston Russian accent. It was pretty hard to parse. But this is a picture I took of him in Iceland in 1989, I think. Just a wonderful, affable, hilarious man. A few months later, Ed White took to the skies with Jim McDivitt in Gemini 4, and Ed was able to do a spectacular spacewalk as well. His lasted just a bit longer and was a little more controlled. Alexei almost didn't get back in because his suit swelled up. The engineering was not adequate to the vacuum, and we can talk about that later after. Pretty scary stuff. But then we learned how to fly spacecraft in space, not just throw them up there and hope for the best. We learned how to dock them together. We had the very first true spacecraft. The lunar module was made to only operate in space, and so it was a true spacecraft. Those all contributed to our knowledge of how we were going to get down there. And then we learned how to do pinpoint landing, as in Apollo 12, that landed right next to Surveyor 3 that had been there for, I think, 3 years. We learned how to drive on the moon, which is very important for upcoming teenage drivers, I think, will need to know that. And through all this time, we were wondering where the Russians were. It was very, very quiet and very secretive. The Iron Curtain didn't let much noise through. So the CIA knew that they were building something big. The picture on the upper right there is from a spy satellite of the N1 booster, which only many decades later did we find out what it really looked like. This is a full-scale mock-up on the left. And the third flight destroyed the launch system, the whole launch site there at the bottom. That was taken from a helicopter, but it was smuggled out of the Soviet Union. All this stuff was very, very secret. N1 was a really powerful booster. It was akin to the Saturn V. It used different kind of fuel. It flew 4 times. They had a 5th one ready to go. Each one was incrementally more successful. The 4th one probably had an explosion from a turbo pump in the very bottom of the last stage, but it had a full dummy of the entire stack that would have carried people to the moon. So they were making progress. Some analysts believe that if they had done the 5th launch, it would have made it to orbit and possibly even to cislunar space. But the problem was, this was going on at the same time as the last flight. This was Apollo 17. 1972. The race was over, and the motivation in the Soviet Union and the funds were drying up. So ultimately the program was canceled before they were able to make it to the moon. Which I think is kind of sad. It would have been neat if we had had multiple groups going there, and that's why I'm happy that we're doing Artemis. One problem the Soviets had constantly was weight. They couldn't build things as lightly as we could. This is their lander on the left, and actually the person who was selected to go be the first cosmonaut on the moon was Alexei Leonov. He would have made a great international hero, really. The lunar module next to it, we had the same launch capabilities, except that ours worked, but we could carry two because we were using pure oxygen for one thing, so the walls could be very, very thin. We were using lightweight materials. Our electronics were much smaller. In their first two spacecraft, they could not evacuate the cabins for their spacewalks. They couldn't get the air out because they were using vacuum tubes in some of their equipment in their spacecraft. So things like this, engineering things, make a big difference. We went on to build the International Space Station, which is over our heads right now, with multiple crews. And this and all these other things have combined to prepare us for going back. Of course, we're going back with technology that is advanced by half a century. And so that changes the dynamic of a lot of things. Boosters have changed. There's Saturn V with the Apollo missions at the far right. SLS at the far left is what's going to carry Orion to the cislunar environment, to the neighborhood of the moon. In the middle is Starship, a giant mega rocket, and that will figure into our story as well. In March, we have the next set of launch windows for SLS, so be watching for that. Everyone has their fingers crossed. It will be carrying Orion off to the moon. Orion looks a little bit like Apollo, but it's much bigger, much more capable. It can carry 4 people. It has a radiation shelter in it because remember, astronauts are traveling well outside of the magnetosphere of the Earth, okay? So if the sun gets energetic, it can be a really bad event. All the Apollo program was timed to go at solar minimum. Artemis is looking at the long term. So we need to have a spacecraft where you can retire into a little storm shelter for a while until the wave of radiation passes. It's got some other great things going for it. The backstage is built by the European Space Agency. And here is Artemis 1, which was uncrewed, but it had lots of cameras. It took selfies, and this is one of them. Very successful mission, but with some caveats that had to be worked out before Artemis 2 was considered crew-worthy. This is Debbie Korth, a brilliant engineer who is in charge basically of the cockpit of Orion. And we have someone right here in this room who works on that hatch. Isn't that a mess? It's a magnificent engineering feat. And you can talk to her afterwards about the doorways on Orion. It has 3 of them. One at the top is a docking hatch because it's going to dock with the lunar landers and also with the gateway, which we'll get to in a moment. So this is what we hope will be happening in just a few weeks. Orion is crossing the terminator, the edge of day and night on Earth. There's the Bahamas down there, on its way to the moon with our 4 brave astronauts. After that, though, we got to get down to the bottom, right? We got to get to the surface. There are 3 different moon landers here. Apollo lunar module is down there at the bottom, which carried 2 people. This one, Mark II, is being built by Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos's group. The Mark I, which is a simpler cargo version of this, hopefully will fly at the end of this year. But the Mark II will be able to bring a crew as well as several tons of stuff. So you can be setting up your moon base. But the big one in the back, the behemoth, is SpaceX's Starship SLS. It supposedly has a cargo carrying capability of 70 tons to the lunar surface. I think they're downgrading that a little bit recently, but things are in flux. This is Gateway, and Gateway is a hub, transportation hub between the Earth and the Moon. That's the plan. It would be about a fifth the size of the International Space Station, and it would orbit the Moon, giving us a way station where the Orion can meet up with the lunar landers. It can also do deep space science. It's in an interesting orbit called a halo-rectilinear orbit. So imagine that the earlobe is the moon. That's how the orbit goes, like a big hoop earring, okay? The velocity of this orbit is such that it's pretty slow when you need to launch back to it. So you need less fuel to come home. So we'll see how all that goes. Gateway is actually in the crosshairs of some in Congress right now who would like to cut that part of Artemis out. Everything is in flux. Nothing is for sure, but I'm hoping that all the good stuff in Artemis will continue for many administrations to come. Another related thing to Artemis that's fascinating to me is this. This is a building at the Johnson Space Center being manufactured. It's a 3D printed building of a Mars habitat. The company that is doing that is called Icon. They're in Austin. And they have some brilliant architects, and they have some really cool giant robots that put down beads of what they call lavacrete. They're about this big around, and they stack them up in walls, put two walls together so that you can have plumbing and electrical in the middle, and you can build all kinds of shapes with these. The nice thing about 3D printed structures on the moon is, first of all, you don't have to bring everything with you. You take lunar regolith and melt it, and Icon is now experimenting with vacuum chambers to do just that. But also, if you build a box and put it on the moon, the corners blow out, okay? In a vacuum, a square thing is not a good thing. These guys can make curvilinear walls. They can make skylights. They're just beautiful, beautiful designs, aesthetically, but also from an engineering standpoint. So NASA initially wants them to figure out how to make roads and landing pads using their lavacrete, but then shortly after that, hopefully they'll be beginning to help build the infrastructure so that we don't have to bring everything with us in terms of lunar habitats. That's the idea. There is, of course, another moon project, another moon program parallel by China. And this is the Chinese lander. It would have a crew of 4 as well. And they're making some progress on this. China has had an amazing track record in their crewed space program. They have hit every milestone that they announced they were going to do.
What are you doing over there?
Whoa. From building their space stations, their own launch vehicles. And so this has some people worried. Some people think that it's important for the United States to beat the Chinese in a very Cold War type scenario. This is a congressional session with Ted Cruz there on the right, and he's saying, what will 2030 look like? And there's Americans kind of bumping around on the moon, and the Chinese have been waiting there for us. No, not that. So China and Russia are teaming up with another almost 20 countries to do their own program. It's an interesting dynamic. I hope that it doesn't become a... There were some dark things about the Cold War. There were some things that were okay in terms of pushing technology. I hope that this mentality will not completely prevail. That's just my take on it. But if you are nervous about the Chinese going, this photo will give you nightmares. It is their lunar lander. It's having a flight test. Okay, and of course the elephant in the room is our lunar lander. No one has seen one yet. We've seen pretty pictures that artists have done. We've seen mock-ups of airlocks and some tests on elevator systems for the SpaceX one, but both systems are being made by corporations, and they don't have to tell us anything. Okay, NASA has always been very forthright and open, and the world was able to watch our progress. The dynamic has changed a little bit. Okay, so is this going to happen in time? Who knows? But apparently NASA is running a little nervous, as I think they should be. It's difficult to make a system this big and land it on a place like the moon, okay? And so they're thinking about plan Bs, one of which would involve Jeff Bezos's company. There's the lunar module on the left, Blue Moon, which is scheduled to leave Earth at the end of this year without a crew, and eventually Blue Moon Mark II, which I think is slated for Artemis 5 or 6. So the plan currently is to have SpaceX land us after Artemis 2, and then Jeff Bezos' system would come online several flights later. What people are wondering quietly is, could you do something in the middle? Jeff Bezos is making some progress that is pretty formidable. And so folks are considering what you might do combining these two systems. Would this be an option for getting us there earlier? And I don't know the engineering enough to tell if this is a good idea or not, but this is all on the table. It's all in flux. Very interesting time. One thing we are sure of is that we can't go back with a normal spacesuit. The South Pole is a horrible place. It is very, very cold. It's also very bright. The sun is always right on the horizon. How many people here have been to the Arctic or Antarctic? Okay, you know how distracting that is. The low sun angles can be disorienting, can be very difficult to work in, and the temperatures are brutal down there. They will an Apollo suit, your feet would freeze in about 15 minutes. So they have contracted with Axiom Aerospace to build a brand new spacesuit. Axiom has some interesting partners like Oakley, who are doing the lunar visor on the helmet, and partnering with Prada to do the suit itself. Prada has a century of experience with clothing. Okay, they're a very good partner. And also, when you're done with the spacesuit, the backpack can be used as a purse. Actually, I'm not sure about that. But it'll be a knockoff, yeah. You can get one on Amazon, though, yeah. So the neutral buoyancy tank laboratory, this gigantic pool at the Johnson Space Center, they have outfitted it to look a bit like the moon, and they are testing Axiom suits and training astronauts as we speak to work on the lunar surface. So things are developing rapidly. One other aspect of Artemis that I love is the historical one. It's about historic preservation. The idea is that all of the Artemis signatories have agreed and stacked hands on the fact that historic sites should be left alone, should be preserved, like the Apollo sites, the first Russian landing site on the moon. There was the first unmanned probe to touch down. So this is a great idea for the moon, for Mars. As we move out into space, we need to be caring for the past as well as looking to the future. And speaking of the future, Artemis is enabling us to do bigger and better and brighter and farther things. There are a whole lot of moons out there besides our own moon. Jupiter has up to 97 moons now. Well, it always did. We just know now. 274 at Saturn. The James Webb Space Telescope just discovered another moon at Uranus, so it's up to 29. Neptune comes in at 16. What are these places like, and why bother going? Well, if we cast ourselves into the future, into a time when we have a healthy cislunar economy, thriving businesses on the moon and the Earth that feed each other and that help technology and the economy globally, we'll be ready to go further. By the way, don't forget Pluto. It's got 5, and Pluto's one of my favorite places. A little cold. Of course, the closest moons besides Luna are Phobos and Deimos at Mars. These places are hard to land on because they are essentially rubble piles. When you touch down, you get a cloud of rocks around you. We've seen this on our asteroid sample return missions. So any astronauts exploring the moon will want to hover above it in something like a jetpack and reach down to do samples and deploy experiments and things. It's also been suggested that going to Phobos and Deimos helps us with planetary containment. We don't want to bring Earth microbes down to Mars, and some astrobiologists suggest that as soon as you put your feet on the ground, it's all over for figuring out where life came from on Mars. I think we can do things to mitigate that, but nevertheless, it's an interesting prospect that you would, in fact, do telerobotic exploration of Mars from the moons in real time before we get down too far with people. It is a pretty exciting prospect, though, to go to Mars with people. And then here is Jeff Bezos's blue moon adapted to Europa. Jupiter up in the sky, Io next door with the big cloud of sodium. And here is another one of my favorite tourist spots. Callisto has these beautiful, beautiful talus slopes surrounding these ice spires, very much like Monument Valley, something like that, but the cap rock would be pure water ice, okay? And the stuff down below is probably mixed with some tholin, some dark carbon-based stuff. Of course, beyond the Galilean satellites, there are lots and lots of spectacular targets to explore, to work on, to play at. This is Iapetus at Saturn. Most of the moons of Saturn that are close by orbit in the ring plane. The disappointing thing about that is that every time you looked at Saturn, there would be a thin line across the sky. That's all you would see of the rings because you're lined up with them. So you would miss all that spectacular stuff. Not so Iapetus, it's inclined. And so Saturn would appear to go around in the sky like this every 14 days. That's how long the orbit is. It would be beautiful. And of course, many people's favorite, Enceladus. There are geysers that squirt 400 kilometers into the sky, 250 miles. There's no air to slow it down. And so these things thunder into the heavens, except there's no thunder because there's no air. But they're squirting out from a saltwater ocean, very, very similar in content to what we have in our oceans here. Cassini flew right directly through the plumes and was able to sample them in situ. So Carolyn Porco, who was the head of the science imaging team, told me that if you were an astronaut standing next to these geysers and you stuck your hand in one, you probably wouldn't even feel it. They are powerful in terms of how far they go, but it's because the gravity is so light and there's no air to slow them down. So very, very alien, wonderful environment. And then, of course, there's Titan with its methane seas. We use methane to warm our homes, right? Here it rains methane. The mountains are made of water. Ice frozen to the consistency of granite. And there is a starship perched on the craggy shoreline, Carmel of Titan. Here is Uranus, seen from Ariel. Uranus would be gigantic in the sky, by the way. From Ariel, it would be as far across as about 45 full moons. So imagine how terrifying that would be. And really cool. I would be this guy with his arms up like that. I would really like that. So this is a typical picture that we got during the Apollo era. We earned the right to put our flag there. We weren't saying this belongs to us. It wasn't an imperialistic thing. We were not declaring this territory for the United States. We came in peace for all mankind. That's what the lunar module plaque said. But we put the flag there to represent all the hardworking people who had made it happen. With Artemis, I hope that someday we will have a similar image. Lots of people involved in a wonderful project. And so I leave that with you. I did bring some books if you're interested in digging more into this subject. I did a bunch of paintings for it. And I believe we have a couple of minutes for questions. Okay. Oh, there's $30, by the way. Except for you. All right. So, yes. First of all, thank you all very much for not throwing anything and being a great audience. All right, questions, comments?
Sorry,
Yes.
I got the mic. So, it sounded like when you were talking about Lunar Gateway, I inferred that you were saying that the lunar landers were reusable. Is that so?
They come in two different versions. The Elon Musk version is completely reusable. There are two forms for the Jeff Bezos one, the Blue Origin one. If you don't carry a crew, you can carry a lot more supplies. So you decide whether you want a cargo, sortie, or a crewed version.
Okay.
Yeah.
Real quick comment and a quick question as well. I remember 9 planets, 31 moons when I was a kid, and now, you've got all these hundreds. You mentioned Mars and the cave underneath, and it's kind of a nuanced question, I guess. What's the climate like down there? Is there any atmosphere? And I guess could it possibly be sealed or whatever so that you could make a sheltered environment for folks to, sustain themselves down there?
See, that is a great question. Actually, there are a lot of studies about habitats on the moon and Mars using existing caves, these lava tubes. We have seen lava tube skylights on the moon and on Mars. On Mars, it's going to be cold down there, but it will have the same air pressure as the surface. So it doesn't get you a lot, but in both of those cases, the lava tends to be pretty porous. So the first thing you would do is cover the inside with something to seal it, and then you could build structures in there or actually use it for walls and flatten the floor and things like that. There are a lot of different scenarios they've studied, but yeah, I think lava tubes will play a great part in our future. There are lava tubes also on Io. The problem is they keep filling up with lava, so it's probably not a good place for a home. You could have a housewarming. All right, who's next? Yes.
Mike, good to see you back again.
Yeah, good to be here.
You mentioned when Cassini went through the plumes from Enceladus and sampled it. What did they find?
So, what they found when they flew through the plumes is they found salt, several different forms. They found some organics, which is intriguing, right? And a few other minerals, but it was fairly pure salt water, which is fascinating from an astrobiological standpoint. Yeah. So,
To his question, wouldn't there be advantage to being under the ground there from the standpoint of being shielded from radiation?
yes, that is a huge advantage. Yeah. Although it turns out that if you plop a habitat on the surface of the moon, you can adequately shield it with 1 meter of dirt, or even less of water. About 20 inches of water will do it as well. So some designs have water storage in the walls outside of the crew compartment. If you're on a spacecraft that's interplanetary, there are lots of ways to approach that. But yeah, that's the lava tube does give you that advantage, definitely.
How are they going to shield the astronauts on that long flight?
They are typically just going to watch for flares, and if something is threatening, they do have a little radiation shelter right in the center, behind the center couch, that everyone can crawl into, and they bring storage locker stuff in to kind of cocoon it from up above. It would not be comfortable, but you would be alive, so that would be good. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Oh. Thank you for that presentation. You had some interesting concepts for the what was happening on the ground. But my question is, in your research, have you found anything with respect to communication with the vehicle from Earth, something that would be an improvement over RF, where the bandwidth is so small with the RF? Have you looked at, is there anything in your book about other technologies?
A little bit, and I don't know a lot about that, but I do know that they have multiple systems on it at different frequencies. And do you have an answer for that? This is the answer, man.
I was lucky to work on comms for Orion, and they're flying as an experiment. Apparently, recently announced optical comms back to Earth. So there's a name for it, OBO or so, I forget what it is. Begins with an O. And also, you may notice that Orion doesn't have the high gain antenna that the service module on Apollo did. And one of the things they do to supplement comms on Orion is they use phased array antennas. They're made right here in Colorado at Ball Aerospace. And so these are antennas can actually electronically steer instead of a mechanical gimbal. So it's amazing tech.
That is amazing technology, and it's also being used in planetary exploration now, phased array stuff, because you don't have to gimbal it. You don't have hardware that's going to stick on you. And so, yeah, that's okay. So great. Thank you. Yeah. There's one back there.
Two quick questions. Early in your presentation, you talked about the Russians having trouble evacuating atmosphere from their capsule because of the vacuum tubes. Could you elaborate on that? Why would a vacuum tube be affected by more vacuum?
Because they're not really a full vacuum in a vacuum tube. And if you get hard vacuum, it's probably going to explode. But it wasn't just that. It was, all the connections they were using were fairly standard that work nicely in an atmosphere. When Alexei Leonov took his spacewalk, the airlock had to be external, and then it was discarded after the spacewalk. So the Soyuz spacecraft are much more advanced. They can, they use solid state stuff, so no longer a problem.
You also talked about preserving the historical sites on the moon. Is there any indication at this point that they're slowly being destroyed by micrometeorites or anything like that?
Well, they're probably wearing down. It's a pretty gradual process. The main thing they're concerned about is somebody walking all over them, and I think that's a much more real and immediate threat. We're pretty good at messing up wilderness areas, and I look at this as a wilderness area.
I'd like to sneak in a third question based on what you were talking about just a moment ago from another question, and that is this safe room, as it were, for radiation. And you talked about water earlier and a meter's worth of soil. What actually will be protecting the safe room? Lead, water, something else?
It's something like lead, and I'm not completely sure. Do you know? No. Do you know? Does anyone know? I could make something up. It's a framus that they build around it. I don't know. But we can look that up. We can find anything online, even though some of it's made up.
There was a paper a few years back about using polymers for radiation protection. So if you make a lead shell, high energy particle hits the lead shell on one side and another high energy particle pops out on the other like a stack of needles. Whereas a polymer is like hitting wax, it just gets stuck.
Yeah, right. And they have some polymer combined with lead on the Europa Clipper that's on its way to Jupiter. So radiation is definitely something we're, need to deal with. Another study that I thought was interesting was done in France of generating a magnetic field around a spacecraft. So you bring your magnetosphere with you. And they were able to adequately do that with a thing that was about this big. So they're looking for very small volunteers now.
A deflector shield.
Yeah, that's right. Anything else? Okay. All right. Well, thank you all so much and for making me welcome.